behind me is my actual project car. It is a 1976 Celica GT Liftback. I've always wanted a Mark IV Supra since I was probably 12 years old, first Fast and the Furious. I couldn't afford one, I still kind of can't. About 5 years ago, I started to save up some money and I realized that I could buy something kind of neat, unique that is related to the Mark IV Supra. Basically in the 1970s, early 1970s, Toyota had some luck with the 2000 GT. It was not quite a supercar at the time, but a really, really high performance car that they had built, and people loved it. It was great, it was fast, it was fun, you know, for the time. And now they're worth tons and tons, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. But what they wanted to do was build an entry-level sports car, and what they did was they looked at what Ford, Chevy, and Dodge were doing with the pony cars of the day, and they wanted to build something similar. And I think if you look at the design language here, you'll see similarities. I have people tell me all the time, it looks like a Mustang. This car looks like a mini Mustang, and it's one thing everybody points out. So what they did was they went and basically took the pony car design and built a small Toyota Japanese version of it. And it did really, really well. They started out with the TA, which is the early body style Celica, and they did just a normal flat back, not a lift back. They had some smaller engine options. I think they had a 1600cc, like a 1.6 liter version, and they've actually, Japan got some cooler engines coming up into the mid 70s and late 70s. They ended up using this in different types of racing. They did build a double overhead cam engine for this car in Japan. I don't think we ever got it here in the United States. But in the United States, the best version that we got was, in my opinion, the later version liftback with the GT, basically the GT spec and the 5-speed. It was the highest performing one that we got, that was in somewhat decent production numbers. It's not super, super rare, but at this point in time, come 2023, there are not very many of them left. As you can see, the body of mine is not perfect. The core is great. There's no rust on the floors. There's no rust in the body itself. But things like the fenders have been done. There's a small spot on the trunk that has been done. It has a little bit of Bondo in it. But overall, they built a really cool, well-handling sports car. And what Toyota ended up doing is they took the Celica and they split it off next generation. This is an RA29, so it's basically a facelifted 76 US model. After this generation, the next generation, they split off the Celica and the Celica Supra, and then the Supra became its own line. But before that, you know, things like, people may not notice this, the Supra is a liftback. That came from this design. They pulled it out of this version of the Celica. So to me, this is like the oldest school version of a Supra you can buy. Donut Media recently did a video where they drove all of the Supras, and I think they kind of missed out by not driving this. Like, if you take a look at the Skyline and where it came from, and I think they've driven all of those as well. They drove the Ken Mary, that first generation. That's a nickname for it for some folks who drove that over in Japan. It's a very similar car to this, higher performing. If I was able to get my hands on the dual overhead cam version of this, I think the performance would actually be similar. And those are $150,000, $250,000 cars, whereas you can pick one of these up in decent condition for $10K to $25K if you want one that's completely done up, repainted, all that. So it's like an entry-level version of the original Supra, and it keeps up with the original Skyline. So I think that's really neat, and a really cool way to get into older carbureted cars.
Yeah.
The car itself needs a good bit of work at the moment. I just took it out of storage. We're gonna do, an ignition tune-up. We're gonna do a tune-up in general. Basically engine overhaul, oil change. I'd like to do a fuel filter, and I do have performance parts for it. So I've got side draft carbs, header. I need to do a couple of different things as well. On the interior, it needs kind of a lot of love. It's gonna need carpets. Everything works on the interior, which is pretty cool with an old car like this. But yeah, it needs carpets and speakers need to be replaced. It's missing the A-pillar insert. So there's some stuff to do, but it runs and drives really well. So let's take a look at the engine. So here is the heart of the car. It's the 20R. It's a 2.2 liter carbureted engine. This is my first carbureted car. I have a motorcycle that's carbureted that I'm still working on. But rather than fuel injection, right, rather than having a computer or a basic version of the computer telling the engine when to do spark and fuel and basically along with combustion and slightly adjusting timing with the computer, instead it's all mechanical. So the air comes in mechanically. You pick your jet sizes, which there's usually like a kind of, my understanding is a high jet and a low jet for different rev ranges, and that basically you do that based on where you live, right? So the air density, humidity, things like that all play a factor with a carbureted car. Yeah, so it's a really, really interesting motor. This is the biggest one we got in America. Like I said, there were smaller versions of this. This version also went into the Toyota pickup, which became the Tacoma. And they eventually upgraded that with a 22RE engine, which came in the next generation of the Celica as well. So certain folks did hybrid builds where they would do a 22RE bottom end with a 20R head. They got some high compression, more revs. This really does feel, I mean, I would imagine this was probably designed for the Toyota pickup and put in here. It's definitely lower lugging RPMs. It's not a high rev happy motor. But we have some performance stuff that we can do to definitely get some more power out of it, which will be fun. But the Porsche was all focused on handling, no power, really no power at all. So to give you a better look at the bodywork, you can see originally there's a door, like an actual physical stripe here that's been taken off, which I like the look without it, but it does need paint. I didn't do that, I bought it like that. Some cool stuff that this car has with the GT, not all of these got this, but this is a factory GT sticker kit, which I hopefully someday will have this resprayed and want to have replaced. But the real thing I wanted to point out was the suspension. The reason why I bought this specific Celica is it had a lot of parts that I wanted. I wanted the T3 coilovers that are on this. Techno Toy Tuning, they make great stuff. If you look at Brian Scotto's build on his AE86 that he's putting a VR6 into, he buys a lot of the stuff from them, like the Ford rear end mounting parts that also can go into this car. The AE86 it's a Corolla, but it shares some of the stuff with this. You can put the subframe in here when you're doing a beam swap, things like that. But yeah, so T3 tuning, suspension, panhard bar, and then these American racing wheels, which they look kind of neat because it looks muscle car-y, but I do have a different set of wheels that we'll see back at the shop that I want to refinish and put on here that are Japanese. They're actually, I think they fit the car a little better because of the heritage of the car. Small car, so hard to get the shot with the lighting, but this is the interior. The seats definitely need to be reupholstered. The passenger's in much better shape. The driver's seat has just been destroyed from people getting in and out over the years. But I took the factory wheel. This is a personal wheel. It's a Fittipaldi edition from 1978 when, I can't remember, there was a win that year that was really important. I'm not recalling it off the top of my head, but it's a period correct wooden wheel that I really like. Other people with cars without power steering will tell you why this is so stupid, and it is. It's because it's so small, right? So a factory wheel is much bigger, makes it much easier to turn the car, especially when you're going slow. But I really like the look of it. I have the factory wheel, of course. I could always switch back out. All the gauges work, all the panels work. This car even had, I don't know if you can see it down here, but an early version of like a not check engine light, but some dummy lights like you'd see in like an E28 BMW. They have some stuff up here too. 4 different systems. That's the only thing on the car. It works, but everyone is triggered. All the sensors need to be redone. So that's the only thing that doesn't work. But heat vent, technically it is an AC car. I've never used it, and I'm afraid to engage the clutch because who knows, the last owner didn't know the last time it was used. So yeah, it's a really cool interior. It's one of those things, the modern Supra, the Mark IV Supra, Everything's kind of angled at you. This one, all of the gauges are kind of, they're not angled at you, but they're really right up front, right in your face. Everything's mechanical, which is really fun and awesome. Brown interior, like I said, it is rough. It needs certain things like a carpet, reupholstered seats. It's missing these A-pillars. But all the major stuff that you couldn't find is here. So things like door cards, the rear of the car is in really good shape. There's a panel that's not in the trunk right now that I do have really good shape. So if you were to reupholster the seats and do carpet alone, it would look like a completely different car. But let's hop in and drive it. Owning a carbureted car is not like owning a fuel-injected car. You'll see why right here. There she goes. And I'm sure if you have spent a lot of time working on carbureted cars and have it dialed in perfectly, it runs great. You'll see my idle's pretty good, things like that, but long starts, things like that. Right now it's idling fine. On the way here I decided not to want to idle at all, which this does sometimes. I think it might be fuel, so I'd like to do an inline fuel filter and replace the OEM fuel filter. But yeah, let's drive it. I mean, that's this car, no power steering, AC technically, but I don't use it. Windows down, it has a bad radio. It's kind of cool that it still has the 8-track player. I've never tried to use it, but I mean, it's got everything you need and nothing you don't. So let's go. Oh, you also see why this wheel stinks. Really gonna hammer. It wasn't bad because I was able to get out, but if you have to like maneuver tiny parking spaces, it's a real pain. Oh. Also, this car is not that low, but the exhaust hangs a little bit low, so that gets dragged sometimes. The roads that the location that I'm at are a little bit rough, so you'll see me maneuvering some of those, but then we'll get a chance, we'll go find some back roads and rip on it. Couple of things right off the bat. It's loud in here. There's not great insulation, I mean, especially with no carpeting. The car itself is loud. It's got a nice little leak from the exhaust header area, so I'm going to pick up some performance headers. That may come a little bit later, maybe springtime, but I've got a bunch of other parts for it. But the cool thing is the 5-speed was an option. Most of these were 4 speeds, but the GT, you could get the 5-speed as an option. It has, I don't know if you noticed in the back, it has an actual 5-speed badge because that was an option. The gauges up here, everything looks good. It has a charge gauge when your battery's low, oil pressure, which it does take a second to build it. I might go to a little bit heavier oil. And I also have full synthetic, which I've never done on this older car. The last time I did it, I didn't go synthetic. It shouldn't really matter, but it's one of those things that bugs me in the back of my mind. So good tack here. The speedo gauge is off, definitely because of the wheel and tire setup. It's off by like 20%, right? So if you're going 60, it's not 20%, sorry, like 100%. So if you're going 60, you're going 54 kind of thing. Yeah, but I mean, it's comfortable. It's not a bad place to ride. It's very small, so it doesn't feel that small in here, but driving down the road, like there's enough room for almost 2 of me in this lane side by side. Steering is also the same out of the Toyota pickup, so it's a little bit vague, but it does handle really well. I mean, I'm in wide back road turns right now, but it still handles pretty good. I'm definitely impressed. Like I said, it had most of the stuff I wanted on it. I'm definitely, when I purchased it, and I didn't focus on that initially I focused on, there was like a Mustang badge on the back, so finding like OEM badges, which were expensive, hard to find. The emergency brake had to be at a certain angle in order to not drag on the drive shaft. I fixed all that stuff. The brakes, so the brakes would do this fun thing where one corner in the front would just lock up randomly. The car would start to pull, and then it would get hot on that side. My shop, DOS Auto, helped me figure that out. Not my shop I own, the shop I go to. What happened was that somehow water got in the brake lines, and it loses a little bit of fluid, a little bit of brake fluid, so that's something I need to figure out too. But as long as I check the fluid every couple of weeks, and it's, you know, usually it's fine. But yeah, we'll go do a little bit twistier roads, have some fun with it, and head back. It's a really good fall cruising car. It doesn't have a jacket or a hoodie, crack the windows, and it's great. It doesn't have the tire performance to go do like another autocross day like I did before with the Porsche. It's actually right about now, last year. But it might in the future, you know, it's one of those things that really needs to get the tune up and all that stuff done first. And then I want to compression test it just to make sure it feels like it. This thing was supposed to have 110 horsepower when it was brand new. And don't get me wrong, that was brand new was 40 years ago when it should have had 110 horsepower, and like 90 foot-pounds of torque. But it's really far from that now, so I would like to figure out if the engine's worth it. I have some swap parts for beams if I really wanted to do it. I think I could make it happen. But I prefer to keep it as like old school as I can. So we'll see. It depends on if it has compression or not. I'm not going to spend an arm and a leg trying to get another 20R back in here. But if I find one for a reasonable price, if this has problems, I'll look into it. But yeah, let's start with basic maintenance first. Let's head back to the garage now to do some of that maintenance.
As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. It would really help me out. Tune in next time as we work on the Celica.